Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Haley and this is Truth and Fertility. I work at an OBGYN clinic where I teach women and couples how to chart their cycles so they can either achieve or avoid pregnancy and also to manage their fertility. My kiddos are here with me today, so they're just going to be kind of running back and forth. Just mother life, this is what it is. Okay. But today I wanted to give you my birth story because I am no longer pregnant. I do have a 6-week baby girl now. So we took a little bit of a hiatus just to really, soak in the postpartum life and soak in the snuggles of a little newborn. But now I wanted to share with you my birth story because I found it interesting and hopefully you will too. With my two previous children, my son was 2 days late and my daughter was 2 days early. So I'm always kind of right around my due date, but for some odd reason, I thought I was going to be super early. And I started having Braxton Hicks contractions, which are like those fake, quote unquote, fake contractions. I started having those maybe a few weeks before my due date. And at this point is my third. I kind of know like what's real and what's not. But then she was due on a Sunday. And so the Saturday, not the Saturday right before, but like the Saturday over a week before, I started having pretty regular contractions that morning. And one of my good friends is actually one of the doctors at my clinic that I also was getting care for. She wasn't the doctor that ended up delivering Avila, which is my baby. She didn't deliver her, but she could have been one of them if she was on call. Anyways, I texted her and I was like, this is what's happening. They're kind of regular. Is this something? And she was like, that sounds like early labor to me. And I was also like cleaning that morning. I was like running all around. I was really just trying to get her out because by 39 weeks, you're just so done being pregnant. So she was like, maybe it's early labor. I don't know. And so I was having contractions that morning until around noon. And then they just stalled out, totally stopped. Didn't have any for the next few days. I was like, well, dang it, that stinks. So just continued on with being pregnant. And I had my 40-week appointment on 40 weeks plus 1 day. So that would have been a Monday. If 40 weeks would have been Sunday, right? So she was due on a Sunday. That Sunday came and that Sunday went, and I did not have a baby. And so that Monday, the following Monday, so 40 weeks and 1 day, I had an appointment at my OBGYN, just regular pregnancy appointment that morning. And one thing I was really nervous about. So this was the first time that I was going with this doctor at this hospital. With my other two kids, I went with a different doctor, and it was at a hospital that was only about 10 minutes from my house. This new doctor, or this new clinic the one that I work at and the one that I was using for like prenatal care and everything, they were about 30 to 40 minutes from my house, and that also includes the hospital. So I wasn't super nervous about the birth in and of itself, because at this point I'm like, been there, done that. I know what's going on. It's gonna be fine. But driving 30 to 40 minutes in labor, I was not super excited about, and I was kind of nervous about. But my parents live really close to the hospital that we ended up giving birth in. So at least I had that security blanket of knowing that, okay, if it happened at a really weird time, they would be able to meet us there, take the other two kids, and then my husband and I could just be there and have a baby. So I had that appointment that Monday morning. And as we were getting ready for the appointment, I started noticing some contractions, and they were pretty similar to the ones that I was experiencing, a week ago that didn't end up turning into anything. And so I was like, okay, these are coming. And they were actually coming pretty regularly, like every 5 minutes or so. But they were not intense. They were not they were just noticeable. And so I was still just getting ready, getting the kids ready. I had my bag packed though, and I brought my bag with me because I knew there was something going on. And one thing that I forgot to mention was that I always dilate early. I'm one of those very lucky women that dilate early before I actually go into labor. So with my son, who was my first, I was 6 centimeters dilated before I went into labor. Yeah, that just I was very grateful for that. So, and then with my daughter, my first daughter, who is now 2, I was, I think, 3 centimeters dilated before I went into labor with her. So I already knew from my 39-week appointment that I was about 2 to 3 centimeters dilated already with Avila, who is in a bassinet right here. She'll probably wake up at some point, so you'll see her. But I knew that I was already 2 to 3 centimeters dilated. So anyways, back to Monday morning. So I'm like kind of laboring. I didn't really know, but it was coming pretty regularly, but they were not intense. So we get in the car. They're starting to get more intense, but in the car ride, I only had 1 contraction in that like 35-minute car ride to the doctor's office. So I was like, is this real? What's going on? Am I having a baby today? And so my parents took the kids. My husband and I went to the doctor's office, and she checked me, and I was 5 centimeters dilated. So she was like, you're going to have a baby today. And so kind of what the plan was that we brought our hospital bags, and I also brought my birth ball because I live by that thing. I love, love, love laboring on a birth ball. That's what I did with my daughter, and it worked out super well just to help with pain management and stuff. So I brought my birth ball, and basically what happened was my doctor was like, let's sweep your membranes just to try to get this thing going a little bit more. And I've had that done before, and so I knew I was fine with that. And I knew what it felt like. I knew what to expect, all the things. So she swept my membranes. And for those of you that don't, okay, real quick, for those of you that don't know what sweeping your membranes is, basically what happens is, so the baby is in a sack of water, right? That's the water that breaks. And that sack of water is attached to the uterine wall. So basically what happens is the doctor or midwife or whoever goes in with their fingers and basically sweeps the membranes, which are what attach that sack of water to the uterine wall. So they kind of sweep it around to break the membranes around it, and that just helps to stimulate labor. So I had my membranes swept. No, it's not the most comfortable experience, but it did its job. It got things going. So I was starting to labor, but she told me, she's like, go home, labor for a few hours there, and then when things start to get more intense, then just go straight to the hospital. I'll call them, tell them to expect you. So I was like, that's fantastic. Thank you. So instead of going all the way home, we had already planned to just go to my parents' house because, like I said, they're a lot closer to the hospital. So that's exactly what we did. I ended up laboring in my parents' kitchen on my birth ball for about 2 hours. And I was having conversations with my dad. It was kind of funny because every time I had a contraction, I literally just put my head down. And while I was in conversation with my dad, and he would just kind of know if my head was down, just don't expect a response for another minute or so. So finally, after about 2 hours of laboring at my parents' house in their kitchen, it got to the point where they were about, I'd say maybe every 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. And they weren't super, super intense, but I definitely was like, I was feeling them. And also too, when I'm in labor, I've just kind of known about myself that I'm not I'm not a very dramatic person in labor. I don't want anybody touching me. I don't want anybody trying to just do anything. I just am like, give me my space. You go do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. I don't do doulas or anything. I'm sure it would be helpful, but I just, knowing myself, I just literally want to put my head down and labor. I don't want people touching me or anything. It's pretty easy for my husband. So I got to a point where I was like, okay, Sean, which is my husband, Sean, I think we need to go to the hospital. So we get in the car and we stop for coffee because it was, at this point, it was probably, my appointment was at like 8 and we got home 2 hours. It was probably sometime between 10 and 11 at that point, and closer to 11. So we get coffee on our way because I'm like, I think I'm not about to like pop yet. I think we're fine. So we got coffee. And they sized me up for free because I told them I was in labor. And then we went to the hospital. So when we got to the hospital, like I said, my doctor had already called the hospital to tell them that to expect us at some point today. So that was awesome of her because I didn't have to wait in triage or anything. We just got straight into a room, which was so wonderful. So we got into our room And we got to the room probably around 11:30 is when we got into the room. So they were setting me up everything. I asked for a birth ball because, like I said, that is my jam. I just sit on the birth ball, I put my head down, and I labor. So got on my birth ball. We're in the hospital now. They're doing all the things, hooking me up. And so now we're getting into did I do an epidural? No, I did not get an epidural. I have nothing against epidurals. I had an epidural with my son, who was my first. And kind of long story short with that, I really did not like the recovery with the epidural. The epidural itself was fine. I actually got it pretty late even. So I think looking back, if I was 7 centimeters when they gave me the epidural with my son. And looking back, if I had known that transition, which is that time pretty much between 7 to 10 centimeters, usually that time goes really, really fast. So if everything else is taking hours, once you get to 7, 8 centimeters, it's usually pretty quickly to get to 10. Not everybody's experience, but definitely mine. So if I had known that it was going to be going by super, super fast once I got to 7 centimeters, I probably would have told them, okay, I'm good without the epidural. But I didn't know it was my first. Fine. So I got the epidural at 7 centimeters and I literally sat up. They gave me the epidural. 10 minutes later, I sit back down and I'm 10 centimeters. Like I literally was in transition while I was getting the epidural. That's a story for another time. But I didn't feel pushing. So that was kind of nice. It did relieve that. With my daughter, I've always kind of been in the mindset of wanting to do it naturally without an epidural. With my son, obviously it didn't work that way, which is totally fine. With my daughter, I really wanted to try that. And one thing that I've learned with an epidural, or something that I've heard too, is that you really need a reason as to why you don't want the epidural. Like, because you can say without being in labor, I don't want the epidural. But once you're in labor and you're feeling it, you're going to want the epidural. So you need like a reason as to why you are not going to get it, and like a reason to motivate you basically. So I didn't quite have that reason going in, but I was just like, I just want to try it naturally. I didn't recover super well or quickly with my son after the epidural. I also have back issues too. So that probably contributed to it. So then with my daughter, she ended up having meconium in the water. And so at that point, it gets more high risk for sure, because meconium is baby's first poop. So you don't want them breathing that in, all the bacteria, and that you don't want them ingesting that for a very long period of time for obvious reasons, I would think. So I just remember with my first daughter, with Gianna, she had meconium in her water. And so that basically gave me a reason, because I just had that intuition at that point that if I had gotten the epidural, it would have slowed things down. And my labors are also very fast. My son was 5 hours. My daughter, Gianna, was 6 hours. And then Avila was the same exact thing as Gianna. It was 6 hours. So total. So with Gianna, with the meconium in the water, I just wanted to get her out. And I knew that labor was progressing really well and pretty quickly. And knowing how fast my labor went with my son, I figured it would probably go pretty fast this time around as well. I just had that intuition that if I had gotten an epidural, it would have slowed things down. So I just kind of went mama bear mode, and I was like, we're doing this natural, we're doing it. We're going to get this baby out. The pain was very worth it, I promise. But I feel like with those last contractions before I started pushing, it was like this guttural noise that I've never made in my entire life. And it was just, it's pain that you've never experienced before. And then pushing is a whole other deal too. And so I had had that experience. I've had both experiences, one with epidural, one without. I wanted to try without an epidural again this time around. I'm open to the epidural, but I really just wanted to try without, especially because of my recovery being so quick. With Gianna, I literally was up and walking like 4 hours after giving birth to her. With Blaze, my son, it was like a day and a half, 2 days before I could like get up and walk and feel like somewhat normal. Like I couldn't walk on my own. So I was really wanting to try it without the epidural. And so that's what ended up happening. Actually, again, I had another meconium baby. So I was doing well with the contractions and really kind of just keeping my head down, focusing, doing well with that. And I really, really try to keep my cool. That is the thing that I have found makes it doable, is that if I can keep my cool and not freak out, and just kind of keep in the zone. Not really hypnobirthing or anything like that, but just really kind of being in my mind. I can handle it. So that's what I did. And so we got to the hospital around 11:30. Everything got set up and good to go. That's when I really started like really laboring. And again, at that point, but even just that morning, I was already at 5 centimeters. So I was already, kind of getting into it. And so we're at the hospital. I'm laboring pretty hard on that birth ball. I had my water broken for me. And again, she was a meconium baby. There's meconium in there. So again, I'm like, I have my reason. And I got to a point where I'm like, Sean, if this is going to go on any longer, I'm going to need the epidural. Like, I cannot handle this anymore. And when I got to that point, the nurse came in and she checked me. And it was really funny because she's checking me and I'm like, how many centimeters am I? And she goes, I think we need to call the doctor. I'm like, okay, that doesn't answer my question. How many centimeters am I? She's like, between 9 and 10. I'm like, okay, we're not doing the epidural. We're going to get going. And so the doctor came in about 5 minutes later. She was right across the street. And at this point, I had been laboring in the hospital maybe another hour. So it's like 12:30, 12:45. And so doctor gets there. She breaks my water and she just sits there. And we're just kind of waiting. They're looking at the monitor to see how things are going. And we're just kind of waiting. And this is when I get into I guess I was already in transition, but like super intense contractions. And I really only had like 1 or 2 of those super like minute long intense contractions. So it only took a few pushes and then out came this beautiful baby girl, Avila. She was born 12:57 p.m. So almost 1 o'clock. So I was only in the hospital for about an hour and a half before she was born. So I have fast labors. I dilate early. I'm just one of those very lucky people, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, everything went super well. Again, no, it was natural, no epidural. So I felt really good afterwards. So far, this has been my easiest postpartum experience, which I'm super grateful for. I'm going to make a whole other video about postpartum depression. That is something that I've experienced with every single one of both of my 2 older babies. I even experienced pregnancy-induced depression. So I am planning to make a whole other video on that. And just ways that I've found that really help during that time. But this time around, I got progesterone shots. I will explain a whole lot more about that in my next video when I talk about postpartum. But I got progesterone shots, which completely changed the game and made the postpartum experience much more doable. I can count on one hand how many times I hormonally cried instead of needing both hands, both feet, and another human. So this postpartum experience has been so much more doable, much more easy. I also have a whole lot of help. My husband, Sean, took the whole month of July off of work to be home, and that was also a game changer too. So yeah, she has been just a bucket of joy. Yeah. And just kind of adding into the chaos. I feel like with number 3, it's just, you're just kind of, what's one more at that point? Just adding into the chaos. So that's my experience with birthing this little baby girl. And she was also baptized not that long ago. She's just waking up from a nap. So she's still kind of delirious looking. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you guys again next week.